Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to talk about one of the most influential traits in all of Pathfinder 2e, the Incapacitation trait. The Incapacitation trait exists to limit the abilities that can completely remove a creature's agency in the game, whether that be by dominating their mind or instantly killing them. The Incapacitation trait ensures that these effects aren't wildly overpowered, and its existence really only limits PC spellcasters or spellcasters in general, which is actually a good thing. As much as dealing with incapacitation feels incredibly limiting for spellcasters, trust me here, it's better than to not have incapacitation at all. Let's get into it. Alright, so what even is this trait anyway? We should probably have a good understanding of it if we're going to be going further into it. Alright, so if a action has the incapacitation trait, then it's pretty simple. If the target of that action is a higher level than the user of the action, that action is going to be less effective. If a saving throw is prompted by that action, then they get 1 degree of success better, and if there's any check made that the user actually makes, that it is 1 degree of success worse. That way that using these abilities on people who are much stronger than you is substantially more difficult to pull off, but those tricks still work fine on people who are weaker than you. For spells, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's still not that bad. If a spell with the incapacitation trait is cast, you double the spell level and then compare that to the target's level. If their level is higher than double the spell level, then they're harder to affect with the spell, meaning that, their saving throw is 1 degree of success higher, and if you make an attack roll or something, then you have 1 degree of success worse. Otherwise, they're just treated normally for the spell. At first glance, this might be a little bit hard to grasp, but the first couple of times you use it in-game will really just show you how it works. It's not that hard. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about the actual impact of this trait. Ultimately, what it means is that if you, as a player, are fighting creatures above your level, incapacitation effects are much less reliable. They're going to have better saving throws already because they're higher level than you, and they're also, on top of that, going to get 1 degree of success better on saving throws. These two things combined make it incredibly unlikely that a first level charm spell is going to do anything to a creature a couple of levels higher than you. To have the best chance of success for your incapacitation spells or abilities to work, you have to use them at the highest level that you can cast, and even then it isn't guaranteed. Now, as you might have realized, this is a much bigger deal for spellcasters, since spells are inherently limited. At 5th level, you only have a couple of level 3 spell slots, while a monk can use Stunning Fist literally every single round of every combat in the day without issue, and they don't have to worry about heightening Stunning Fist. It's their character level, meaning it's always going to be useful to people at your level. It's not that case for spells. Whenever you're comparing two martial characters, who, generally speaking, aren't going to be running into the incapacitation trait very much depending on their class, spellcasters almost always have the chance to grab a spell with the trait for their spell repertoire. And hear me out now, I think that it's a good thing that spellcasters are limited like this. My main reasons for thinking this are ultimately very simple. In Pathfinder 1e, there wasn't anything like incapacitation to limit the power of spells, and some spells punched far above their weight class to extreme levels. For example, Hold Person had a good chance of taking NPCs out of the fight for multiple rounds if they didn't have a great will save, and Flesh to Stone was basically a save or die spell for Fortitude, which means you can just cast that on wizards and they're screwed. The problems start appearing when you realize that a wizard could prepare a Hold Person and potentially end a fight before it really starts. It's hard to have a cool climactic battle versus a warlord if they get paralyzed in the first couple of rounds of combat, or finally end up finding the Glabrezu that was puppeting a city, only for the cleric to cast banishment on them. Effectively, many of these spells make a lot of fun stories in combat situations trivially easy. Well, fighting Glabrezu maybe isn't something that everyone wants to do. We're still here to play a game and fight things, so someone waving their hands and making problems disappear isn't exactly satisfying for everyone else in the party. It might be fun to pull off for the spellcaster, but the rest of the party can easily feel overshadowed. Even putting aside that side of things, I also think that Incapacitation is great, considering how it affects NPCs just as much, if not more so, than it affects PCs. You know how I just mentioned that Hold Person could take NPCs out of the fights for a few rounds? Well, in Pathfinder 2e, you don't have to worry about someone casting a low-level spell on your Barbarian and then stopping you from playing the game for the next 45 minutes in real life. Which you do have to worry about in Pathfinder 1e, because, yeah, Hold Person can completely remove NPCs from the fight, and so can it remove PCs. Spells with that kind of capability do still exist in 2e, but now if those spells want to have the same level of effectiveness, they generally have to be heightened up to a higher level to deal with the Incapacitation trait. Honestly, I'm just happy that the Incapacitation trait exists, since it means that a 12th level character with a less than good will save no longer has to live in fear of the mighty and powerful 1st or 2nd level spells. If someone wants to take you out of a fight, they actually have to heighten those spells and expend a meaningful resource. 1st level spells generally aren't meaningful resources for high level spellcasters. Now, this system obviously isn't perfect. I can't deny that it sucks when you have no way of knowing whether or not an incapacitation spell or ability is going to be useful on someone before you cast it. It's a lot easier for monks with Stunning Fist because it doesn't cost you anything to use. But if you're casting your highest level spell slot on someone and it turns out that the incapacitation trait is going to make it substantially less effective, that just is unfortunate and not very fun. Personally, I think that this problem predominantly exists because there's no way in the rules to determine a level of someone that you're fighting. Personally, I think that you should be able to use like perception to tell about how strong someone is, but I personally think that there should be a skill feat for all of the magical skills that gives you an action where you just figure out whether or not a particular incapacitation spell would work on a target based on their level. So you could say, okay, is a 3rd level charm spell going to work on this person? You roll that, and your GM says yes or no. So you know about that before you actually expend that as a resource. That way, spellcasters could at least have a smidge of information for their decision making, rather than just making shots in the dark. Ultimately, while my opinion on incapacitation is mixed, I think that it does a lot more good than it does harm. Characters being all but required to have a good wisdom to keep their will save up, to avoid being mind controlled, paralyzed, or worse, got really old in Pathfinder 1e. Not having to worry nearly as much about these problems in 2e is a real breath of fresh air and helps make diverse characters. I really do wish that there was a way for characters to judge enemy level though, and know whether or not their incapacitation effects are going to work, because honestly, a lot of incapacitation spells are the really cool spells that you want to be able to cast. You want to be able to paralyze people or mind control them or turn them to stone. All of that kind of stuff is super badass, and that's part of the reasons why people want to play spellcasters in the first place. So I wish that they had a better way of knowing what will and what won't work. I guess that incapacitation it's just a double-edged sword. But I'd rather have that double-edged sword than have nothing. Thanks for watching. I've been wanting to talk about spellcasters and the incapacitation trait for a while now, so I'm glad I finally got around to it, and I'm realizing I say that like every other video now. Also, in case it wasn't made apparent from this video or you haven't heard it in one of the streams or something, I almost exclusively play martial characters, which 100% biased me against low-level spells punching above their weight class. I am curious though, because obviously I just have one perspective. What do you guys think about the incapacitation trait and how it affects spellcasters? I'm sure that it's a topic that people are going to have varied opinions of, and a lot of you are going to disagree with me. So put a comment down below on exactly how you think my opinion is wrong or right. And yeah, regardless, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.